Look, I'm going to be straight with you. When Ambassador Velthar of the Corinthian Empire requested a human cultural liaison for what he diplomatically called a small domestic matter, nobody in the entire human diplomatic corps expected it would involve bedtime routines. And yet here we are, documenting what became known as the greatest interstellar childcare crisis of 2347, involving several extremely furry alien toddlers who absolutely, categorically, spectacularly refused to go the hell to sleep. According to YouTube analytics, 98% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. But I'm getting way ahead of myself here. Let me back up and give you the full picture because this story is too good not to tell properly. The whole magnificent mess started when Catherine Zhang, a perfectly normal xenoanthropologist from New Singapore, got assigned to the Corinthian Royal Cruiser for a 6-month cultural exchange program. Catherine was legitimately good at her job. She spoke 4 alien languages fluently, had published 2 well-regarded papers on comparative religious practices across 3 different species, had successfully mediated a minor trade dispute between human colonists and the Deltari merchants, and had exactly 0 zilch, absolutely no experience whatsoever with childcare. This last point, as you might imagine, would become extraordinarily, hilariously, painfully relevant. The Corinthians, for those of you not familiar with the major galactic species, looked like someone had taken an earth lion, scaled it up to about 7 feet tall when standing upright, given it opposable thumbs and the capacity for abstract reasoning, and then dipped the whole magnificent creature in a color palette stolen from the most gorgeous sunset you've ever seen. Gorgeous beings. Truly. Absolutely terrifying when angry, majestically imposing when calm, and according to every single human who'd had the pleasure of meeting them, surprisingly fond of what we would call purring when they were content. Deep, rumbling purrs that you could feel in your chest from across the room. Their culture valued honor above almost everything, then strength, then family bonds that made old Earth mafias look casual by comparison. Which brings us, inevitably and unavoidably, to the Cubs. Ambassador Velthar, one of the most respected diplomatic figures in the Corinthian Empire, had 3 offspring. There was Korith, age 4 in Corinthian years, which translated to roughly human 5, already showing the confident bearing of someone destined for leadership. Then Myralyn, age 3, clever and observant with a mischievous streak a mile wide. And finally, little Zephyrin, barely 2 years old, who possessed the supernatural ability of all toddlers everywhere to be simultaneously adorable and exhausting. Under completely normal circumstances, these cubs would have been watched by their maternal unit, but she was currently on an extremely important diplomatic mission to the Antares sector, handling what was very diplomatically referred to in official documents as a delicate situation, but which absolutely everyone with security clearance knew was actually a war almost happened because someone from Species A insulted someone from Species B's ancestral hunting grounds, and now we're all trying very hard not to let this escalate into an interstellar incident. So Velthar was solo parenting 3 energetic cubs, while simultaneously trying to negotiate an enormously complex trade agreement with the hegemony of Syl. And if you think human toddlers are exhausting, if you've ever spent an afternoon with a determined 3-year-old and thought you couldn't possibly be more tired, let me tell you something. Corinthian cubs have all that boundless energy, all that curiosity and defiance and creativity, plus retractable claws, plus the ability to climb up completely vertical surfaces like they're mocking gravity itself, plus vocal cords that can literally shatter reinforced glass when they really commit to a tantrum. Catherine's first week aboard the vessel went absolutely fine. She observed cultural practices with her usual diligence, took copious notes on everything from greeting rituals to meal customs, attended formal dinners where she only committed 2 minor faux pas that were graciously overlooked, and generally stayed out of everyone's way while absorbing information like the professional she was. The Corinthians were unfailingly polite, if somewhat bemused by the small, furless biped walking among them with her tablet and her questions and her obvious fascination with their way of life. Then came night 8. The night everything changed. Catherine was in her assigned quarters, comfortably settled in for the evening, reviewing her accumulated notes and trying to figure out whether the Corinthian gesture for respectful agreement in the face of potential conflict was supposed to involve 3 claw taps on the left shoulder or 4 taps on the right shoulder when she heard it. A sound that started as a low, almost subsonic whine, escalated rapidly to a keen that made her teeth ache, and then became what could only be described as the audio equivalent of someone dragging a metal fork across the exterior hull of a starship while simultaneously operating a broken alarm system. One of the cubs was crying. Then 2 cubs were crying, harmonizing in a way that suggested deliberate coordination. Then all 3 cubs were crying in a complex harmony that could only have been achieved through either pure chance or malicious intent, creating a sound that seemed specifically engineered to cause maximum psychological damage to every adult within hearing range. Catherine, demonstrating either admirable dedication to her cultural exchange mission or absolutely terrible survival instincts that would have horrified her mother, decided to investigate. She found Ambassador Velthar in the main family living area, and the sight before her was something she knew she would remember for the rest of her life. The ambassador looked like he had gone several full rounds with a small but determined hurricane. His usually immaculate golden mane, which he normally kept groomed to diplomatic perfection, was thoroughly disheveled. His formal ceremonial sash, which should have been draped elegantly across his shoulder, was hanging off at a 45-degree angle, like it had given up entirely, and he had what appeared to be a child's crayon drawing of a somewhat lopsided spaceship stuck to his left haunch, slowly peeling off. The 3 cubs, meanwhile, were engaged in what Catherine could only mentally categorize as strategic, coordinated resistance to the concept of sleep. Corith, the oldest, had somehow climbed up to a light fixture near the ceiling and was hanging there like a small, furry chandelier, looking extremely pleased with himself. Miralyn had constructed an elaborate fortress out of approximately 30 floor cushions and was defending her position by throwing toys at anyone who approached. Zephyrin, the youngest, had apparently decided that the solution to being tired was to run in increasingly frantic circles while making a noise remarkably similar to a malfunctioning maintenance drone. "Ambassador Velthar," Catherine said carefully, using her most diplomatic voice, "is everything quite all right this evening?" Velthar turned to face her, and his eyes, Catherine noticed, had the particular 1,000-yard stare of someone who has seen too much, endured too much, and is questioning every life choice that brought them to this specific moment. Liaison Zhang. "I must apologize most sincerely for the disturbance. My offspring are experiencing what I believe humans refer to as a phase." "A phase?" Catherine repeated, watching as Corith chose that exact moment to swing from the light fixture and launch himself with alarming accuracy onto a nearby bookshelf, landing with the practiced grace of a tiny parkour expert. For the past 3 consecutive nights, they have categorically refused to enter their normal sleep cycle. My mate usually handles the evening routine with great skill, but I must confess with some embarrassment that I am struggling considerably to replicate her methods. Catherine observed Miralyn successfully landing a cushion throw that hit Velthar directly in the face. The ambassador didn't even flinch. What methods does she typically employ? She tells them detailed stories of our ancestors, great warriors and legendary hunters who shaped our civilization. She describes historic hunts in meticulous detail, every strategy and triumph. She explains complex battle tactics and the honor won through courage. Velthar's tail swished with visible frustration. These approaches, which have worked for generations of Corinthian parents, are proving completely ineffective. "Have you considered trying to make it boring?" Catherine suggested, then immediately wondered if she just committed some sort of diplomatic blunder. Velthar's ears perked forward with interest. Boring. I do not understand this approach. Yeah, like really genuinely boring. Humans put kids to sleep by deliberately making bedtime the most tedious, unstimulating thing imaginable. We dim all the lights way down. We lower our voices to near whispers. We read monotonous stories about very sleepy caterpillars who are too tired to do anything interesting. Velthar considered this novel concept carefully. You genuinely believe that boredom will succeed where honor and discipline and tradition have completely failed. I mean, it's worth attempting. It was spectacularly, catastrophically not worth attempting. 35 minutes later, after what Catherine would later describe in her personal log as an unmitigated disaster of cross-cultural misunderstanding, she had learned several important lessons. First, that Corinthian cubs found deliberate boredom not restful or calming, but actively insulting to their intelligence and dignity. Second, that Corith possessed a surprisingly sophisticated vocabulary for expressing disappointment, declaring her boring story attempts an unconscionable affront to our cognitive development and natural curiosity. Third, that Miralyn had deadly accurate aim when throwing cushions and was not afraid to demonstrate this skill repeatedly. And fourth, that Zephyrin had fallen asleep for exactly 4 minutes before abruptly waking up and screaming even louder than before, apparently deeply offended that sleep had been attempted through such underhanded, boring tactics. Velthar slumped against the wall with the defeated posture of someone whose spirit had been broken. I am failing them fundamentally. A parent should be capable of meeting their cub's basic needs. This is one of our most sacred responsibilities. Hey, no, absolutely not, Catherine said, surprising even herself with the firmness in her voice. You're doing great under impossible circumstances. They're just kids being kids. This is literally what children do. It's practically their evolutionary purpose to test boundaries and resist reasonable requests. On my homeworld, I successfully commanded entire military legions through complex campaigns. I have negotiated delicate treaties that prevented 3 separate wars. I have faced down opponents twice my size in formal combat, yet 3 small beings, my own offspring, reduce me to this state of complete helplessness. Yeah, welcome to parenthood, which apparently transcends all cultural and biological boundaries. That was when Zephyrin, now thoroughly exhausted and overstimulated beyond any reasonable tolerance, started crying again. But this wasn't the angry, defiant screaming from earlier. This was genuine distress, the kind that tugs at something primal in anyone who hears it. The little cub stumbled toward Velthar on unsteady legs, making a sound that Catherine's translation device struggled with before settling on rendering it as, "Want mama, need mama." "Where, mama?" Catherine felt, her heart physically twist in her chest. She had heard that particular sound before, in a dozen different languages across half a dozen different species during her career. The universal sound of a tired, overwhelmed child who desperately wanted comfort and security but didn't possess the words or the emotional regulation to ask for it properly. Without thinking, operating purely on instinct she didn't even know she possessed, Catherine started humming. It was an old song, something her own grandmother used to sing to her when she was small and couldn't sleep during summer visits. She didn't even remember the proper words anymore, just the melody, low and rhythmic and gentle like waves on a beach. She hummed it almost unconsciously while Velthar scooped up the distressed Zephyrin and held the small cub close to his chest. And then something genuinely interesting happened. Zephyrin stopped crying. Not immediately, not like flipping a switch, but gradually and naturally. The heartbroken sobs became hiccups, which became quiet sniffles, which became silence. The tiny cub's ears, which had been pressed flat against their skull in distress, slowly relaxed into a more neutral position. Corith, still perched on the bookshelf in defiant wakefulness, had completely stopped his climbing activities and was listening with evident curiosity. Miralyn had actually emerged from her cushion fortress, her toys forgotten, watching Catherine with wide eyes. "What are you doing?" Velthar asked very quietly, as if afraid that speaking might break whatever spell had been cast. "Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. It's called humming. It's sort of like you're purring, but accomplished with our vocal cords instead. It's a human thing. We do it instinctively to soothe babies and small children. Please continue this humming, immediately. So Catherine continued. She transitioned smoothly from humming to actually singing, making up words when she couldn't remember the original ones, keeping her voice soft and low and as gentle as she could manage. She sang about stars scattered across the darkness of space, about ships sailing safely through the night, about gentle things and quiet things and peaceful things. She sang about tomorrow being a new day full of adventures, but tonight being a time for rest. Zephyr's eyes were drooping closed, fighting to stay open but losing the battle. Miralyn had abandoned her defensive fortress entirely and was creeping closer, drawn by the unfamiliar but soothing sounds. Corith had climbed down from the bookshelf and was now sitting on the floor with his tail wrapped around his legs, watching Catherine with the intense, analytical gaze of someone filing away information for future use. Velthar stood perfectly, absolutely still, as if he was afraid any movement whatsoever might break the fragile peace that had descended. Catherine kept singing. She went through 3 different lullabies from her childhood, then ran out of real ones and started making them up entirely, just maintaining the rhythm and the gentle, soothing tone. Her voice wasn't particularly good. She knew that with certainty. She had been politely rejected from her school choir at age 12, with the teacher's diplomatic suggestion that perhaps she consider other extracurricular activities. But apparently, to 3 exhausted alien cubs who just needed someone to tell them it was okay to sleep, not particularly good, was more than sufficient. Zephyrin fell completely asleep in Velthar's arms, tiny chest rising and falling with deep, peaceful breaths. Miralyn curled up on a floor cushion nearby, fighting valiantly to keep her eyes open but losing that battle with increasing speed. Corith, the last determined holdout, finally stood up and walked over to Catherine with great dignity. "Will you sing again tomorrow night as well?" "If your father wants me to, then absolutely. I want you to." The young cub yawned hugely, showing an impressive array of sharp teeth. "Your songs are very strange, but they are peaceful strange, calm strange, good strange. I will definitely take that as a compliment. You should take it as such. It is meant as high praise." And with that imperial pronouncement delivered, Corith walked with great dignity to the sleeping chamber and, absolute miracle of miracles, went to bed voluntarily. Catherine stopped singing. The sudden silence felt enormous and fragile. Velthar very carefully carried the sleeping Zephyrin to the cubs' quarters, returned for Miralyn, and came back to where Catherine was still sitting on the floor, slightly stunned by what had just occurred. "I owe you a considerable debt," Velthar said quietly, his voice full of genuine emotion. "What you just accomplished was truly remarkable." "It was just singing some old songs. Humans do it all the time. It's really not special." "No," the ambassador said firmly. "You accomplished something profound. You translated an unmet need through significant cultural barriers. You provided comfort through completely unfamiliar means. You adapted your approach successfully when my traditional methods failed utterly. This is the very essence of what we hope to achieve through cultural exchange programs. I mean, I'm genuinely glad it worked, but it's really not that philosophically deep. Kids like songs. That seems to be pretty universal across species, apparently. Perhaps the mechanism is universal, but the songs you selected, the gentleness of your entire approach, the patience you demonstrated, these are not universal qualities at all." Velthar's tail swished thoughtfully. "My cubs have been under considerable stress from their mother's prolonged absence, from the disruption to their normal routine, from my own obvious inability to provide what they needed. You gave them something I could not. Permission to rest, delivered without judgment or frustration." Catherine felt distinctly uncomfortable with this level of praise. "Look, I just really didn't want to listen to screaming for another 3 hours. Completely selfish motivations here. Liaison Zhang, You may deflect recognition if you wish, but please know that your assistance tonight was genuinely invaluable to my family." She nodded, accepting the gratitude, if not quite believing she deserved it, and headed back to her own quarters. She figured that was that. One weird night. One interesting cultural moment. Definitely something worth including in her official report. She figured catastrophically wrong. The next evening, as Catherine was settling in with her notes and a cup of tea, there was a firm knock at her door. She opened it to find Corith standing there in sleeping clothes, looking remarkably formal and serious for someone so small. "Liaison Zhang, Father says that you are invited to come and sing again tonight." "He says I'm invited. I say you must come," Corith corrected with brutal honesty. "Father is being diplomatic and saying you are cordially invited, but I am being honest and saying, if you do not come, Zephyrin will definitely scream, and probably Mira Lin will join in solidarity, and I will be forced to participate out of sibling loyalty, even though I am old enough to know better." Catherine couldn't help but laugh at such frank assessment. "Well, when you put it exactly like that, how can I possibly refuse?" So she went, and she sang, and all 3 cubs fell peacefully asleep. The night after that, she didn't even wait for any invitation. She just showed up at bedtime like it was the most natural thing in the universe. "Ah, Liaison Zhang," Velthar said, and was that definite relief in his voice? "How extraordinarily fortunate that you happened to pass by our quarters at precisely this time." "Yeah, total coincidence," Catherine agreed. "Definitely wasn't waiting in the corridor checking my chronometer for the appropriate moment." "Definitely not," Velthar agreed solemnly, with what Catherine was learning to recognize as Corinthian humor. This routine became their new normal with surprising speed. Every single evening, Catherine would arrive at the family quarters just before the cubs' designated bedtime. The lighting would dim to comfortable levels. The family would settle into their preferred spots, and Catherine would sing. She taught the cubs human lullabies from dozens of different Earth cultures. They quickly developed preferences and requested their favorites. Corith particularly liked songs about grand adventures that ended safely with everyone returning home. Mira Lin preferred songs about families and belonging and coming home. Zephyrin didn't seem to care about the specific content as long as Catherine was the one singing. Sometimes Velthar would join them, his deep bass voice harmonizing with Catherine's admittedly mediocre soprano in ways that absolutely should not have worked, but somehow created something beautiful. He taught her fragments of traditional Corinthian sleep songs, low-resonant melodies that made her entire chest vibrate sympathetically. She taught him Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, which he performed with such profound dignity and seriousness that Catherine had to bite the inside of her cheek hard to keep from laughing. The cubs started calling her Aunt Catherine. Well, her translation device rendered it as Aunt. But when she asked for clarification, the literal translation was apparently something closer to female adult who is not parent but is chosen family anyway, and therefore important. She chose to interpret this as an extremely good sign. Other Corinthians throughout the ship began to notice the dramatic change. Ambassador Velthar's cubs were no longer the tiny terrors keeping half the crew awake at night. They were calm, well-rested, and significantly less likely to climb things they absolutely should not be climbing. Word spread through the ship's community like wildfire. Then came the request that Catherine absolutely, in no way, was prepared for. "Liaison Zhang," Velthar said one morning over breakfast, looking slightly uncomfortable. "I have been asked by a colleague to make what may be an unusual inquiry." "Go ahead, hit me with it." "Commander Thaxel, who serves as our security chief, has cubs of his own, 3 of them, similar ages to mine. They are experiencing identical sleep resistance issues." Catherine paused mid-sip of her coffee, processing this. "He wants me to sing to his kids too, if you would be willing." I assured him this was potentially an imposition on your time and research, but he was quite insistent that I ask. "I mean, sure, I guess, if it genuinely helps these families." It helped tremendously. Word spread even further and faster. By week 3 of this unexpected arrangement, Catherine had somehow become the completely unofficial but universally acknowledged bedtime coordinator for literally every single cub aboard the entire ship. 6 different families, 18 cubs total, ranging from age 1 to age 6. She had divided them into 3 groups organized by age and temperament, created a detailed rotation schedule that would have impressed a military logistics officer, and somehow ended up with an increasingly solid reputation as the human who possesses mysterious cubs' sleep magic. The Corinthian parents treated her like she had personally discovered the secrets of faster-than-light travel. They brought her elaborate gifts that she politely tried to refuse. They offered her formal honors that seemed way too important for someone who just sang some songs. They pledged their family loyalty to her in ceremonies that her translation device struggled to properly convey the significance of. All of this because she sang some gentle songs at bedtime. "I genuinely feel like I'm running some kind of space daycare operation," Catherine told Velthar one evening after successfully getting the final group of cubs settled and sleeping. "This is absolutely not what I thought cultural exchange would involve when I signed up. Yet it is perhaps the single most valuable exchange we could possibly have had," Velthar said thoughtfully. "You have demonstrated to us that strength is not only expressed through combat prowess or strategic thinking. That gentleness possesses its own form of considerable power. That caring for our young can and should take many different forms. You guys already knew perfectly well how to care for your children. I just offered a slightly different approach drawn from my own culture." "Yes, precisely, and in doing so, you revealed our own cultural rigidity that we had not recognized. We had become so intensely focused on our traditional methods, passed down through generations, that we literally could not adapt when those methods failed under new circumstances. You demonstrated flexibility and adaptation without ever compromising the quality of care." Catherine thought about that perspective for a moment. "So, what happens when I eventually leave? When this exchange period officially ends in a few months? We will have learned invaluable lessons from you that will persist. Already, several parents are attempting to create their own songs and lullabies. The results are admittedly quite mixed in quality and effectiveness, but the genuine effort and willingness to try something new is absolutely present." Velthar's expression softened noticeably. "Though, I must confess with complete honesty, my cubs will miss you terribly, as will I. I'll miss them too, even when they're being tiny menaces who climb everything. Especially when they are being tiny menaces. Especially then, yeah." The remaining months of Catherine's exchange assignment passed with surprising speed. She continued all her official duties diligently, her formal research, her careful observations, and documentation of Corinthian culture. But the evening routine with the cubs remained her absolute favorite part of every single day. The quiet predictability of bedtime songs, the gradual peaceful settling of energetic cubs, the deep satisfaction of knowing she had genuinely helped these families. She taught Velthar and all the other parents absolutely everything she could think of about her approach and methodology. The crucial importance of consistent routine and predictability. The value of gentle transitions from high-energy activity to calm rest. The genuine power of boring, repetitive predictability. The immense value of simply being physically present and emotionally patient. Some parents took to these concepts immediately and naturally. Others struggled significantly but kept trying with admirable determination. Commander Thaxil became particularly skilled, developing his own repertoire of deep-voiced lullabies that could have cubs sleeping peacefully within minutes. He credited Catherine's teaching entirely, but she knew better. He had demonstrated willingness to be vulnerable and patient with his children, to try completely new approaches. That courage was all his own. On Catherine's final night aboard the Corinthian vessel, there was a formal ceremony that apparently half the ship attended. Velthar, speaking with considerable emotion, presented her with something called a Den Friend Medallion, which her subsequent research revealed was an extremely significant honor, indicating she was now considered adopted family to multiple Corinthian houses simultaneously. for teaching us that sometimes the fiercest and most important battle is fought not with claws or weapons but with a gentle lullaby," Velthar said formally to the assembled crowd, "and for demonstrating conclusively that humans understand profoundly what it means to care for cubs across all boundaries." The cubs, every single one of them, presented her with drawings they had created specifically for this occasion. Spaceships of varying accuracy, fields of stars, stick figures that were apparently supposed to represent her. Zephyrin, now so much more confident and verbal than the crying toddler from months ago, held up their drawing with obvious pride. "This is you singing," the little cub explained carefully, pointing to a figure with an enormous mouth. "And this is all of us being asleep and happy and safe." Catherine, who had maintained professional diplomatic composure through literally countless formal events and ceremonies during her career, felt genuine tears threatening. "Thank you so much, all of you. This has been the weirdest and simultaneously the best assignment of my entire professional career." That final night, she sang one last time for all of them. Every single cub gathered together in the largest common area, a sea of furry faces and bright, curious eyes looking at her with affection. She went methodically through everyone's personal favorites, all the songs they had learned together over these months, the ones they had requested over and over until she knew them perfectly. As the very last cub drifted peacefully off to sleep, Catherine realized something profound. She had come to this ship to study alien culture objectively, to observe and record and analyze from a professional distance. But what she had actually done was become intimately woven into their daily lives. She had provided comfort and care across significant species boundaries. She had demonstrated practically that some fundamental needs are truly universal, even when the specific solutions look remarkably different. Not bad at all for someone who had never babysat a single time in their entire life before this. Velthar walked her personally to the transport shuttle the next morning. "My mate returns next week," he said quietly. "I confess I am both enormously relieved and somewhat apprehensive. What if she returns and discovers the cubs no longer respond to our traditional cultural approaches? Then you teach her everything you learned here. You adapt together as partners. That's fundamentally what families do, right? When precisely did you become so wise about complex family matters, Liaison Zhang?" "About 3 months ago, when some tiny aliens decided unilaterally that I was their aunt." Velthar's expression did the thing that Catherine had learned meant he was definitely trying not to laugh out loud. They were absolutely correct in that assessment. Yeah, they really, genuinely were. The transport shuttle carried Catherine back to the human diplomatic station. She filed her comprehensive reports, presented her detailed findings to multiple committees, and received official commendations for her exceptionally successful cultural exchange program. Her superiors were unanimously impressed by her insights into Corinthian family dynamics, her successful integration into their complex social structures, her demonstrated ability to build meaningful cross-species relationships. Interestingly, none of them mentioned the singing at all. Catherine's official report didn't emphasize it much either. It was just a footnote, really. A small observational note about the apparent universality of childhood comfort needs and the demonstrated effectiveness of musical intervention in establishing healthy sleep routines across species. But in the personal log she kept privately, she wrote the complete truth, that sometimes the most important and impactful diplomatic work happens not in formal conference rooms or complex political negotiations, but in quiet evening moments when someone small is crying and desperately needs comfort. That meaningful cultural exchange isn't always about grand gestures or careful political maneuvering. Sometimes it's really just about showing up consistently at bedtime and singing some gentle songs. 3 months after Catherine left the Corinthian vessel, she received an unexpected message. It was from Velthar, carefully marked as personal correspondence rather than official communication. "Liaison Zhang, I sincerely hope this message finds you well and thriving. I wanted to personally inform you of some recent developments. My mate has returned safely from her mission. Upon learning of your considerable contributions to our cub's well-being during her absence, she was initially quite skeptical. Corinthian lullabies and evening rituals are her sacred tradition, her maternal responsibility passed down through generations. But then she listened carefully to me attempt your human songs. She watched our cubs respond with obvious peace and contentment, and she asked me to teach her everything I had learned. We now successfully combine our approaches. She tells them traditional stories of warriors and ancestors, and I sing them adapted human lullabies. The cubs absolutely thrive under this blended approach. They still frequently ask about you, particularly when they are tired and resistant to sleep. What would Aunt Catherine sing right now has become a remarkably common question in our household. I have been formally asked to extend a genuine invitation. In 6 months, there will be a major celebration on my homeworld, our annual Festival of Families. We would be profoundly honored if you would attend as our personal guest. The cubs insist repeatedly, and I find I completely agree with their assessment. You are family now, strange as that concept seemed when we first met. Please consider this invitation completely genuine and without any political pressure whatsoever. Whether you attend or not, know with certainty that you fundamentally changed us for the better. You showed us flexibility where we had only rigidity, gentleness where we previously valued only strength. These are gifts we will carry forward through generations. The cubs send their love, as do I and my mate, Ambassador Velthar. Catherine read the message 3 complete times, then a 4th for good measure. Then she composed and sent her reply. Ambassador Velthar, I would be genuinely honored to attend. Please tell the cubs I have learned several new songs, and I expect full detailed reports on their current sleep schedules. Also tell them I miss them terribly too. See you in 6 months, Catherine Zhang. She leaned back in her chair, smiling at nothing in particular. Somewhere out there in the vast galaxy, a bunch of alien kids were probably fighting bedtime right at this very moment. Their parents were probably exhausted and exasperated and doing their absolute best with imperfect information. And maybe, just maybe, someone somewhere was singing them gently to sleep. The end author's note. Turns out the real key to successful interstellar diplomacy isn't advanced technology, superior weapons, or even complicated legal treaties. It's just understanding that absolutely everyone, no matter what planet or culture they're from, desperately needs sleep. And sometimes you just need someone patient to sing you a gentle song until you finally get there. Who knew humanity's greatest contribution to galactic society would turn out to be lullabies and bedtime routines? We certainly didn't predict that outcome. But here we are, and honestly, I genuinely cannot think of a better legacy for our species.